Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. From the Jethro's Barbecue Studios, I'm Justin Brady. We're talking about venture capital today. Does that sound boring to you? I mean, it probably does. Should you care about it? I don't know, maybe. The Midwest states saw less investment recently, and we had this 2021-2022 peak, and then things started kind of fading back. Actually, the losses were deeper in Iowa than our surrounding states. So is that good or bad? Do we actually care about tech companies coming here at all? Do we? We're going to ask that. We're going to ask that to Liz Keehner, the principal of Next Level Ventures here in Iowa. Liz, thanks for coming on the show. Is it fair to say Next Level is kind of the big dog in venture capital in Iowa?
Thanks for having me, Justin. And I think that's probably a fair statement. Next Level Ventures was absolutely the first venture capital firm established here in Iowa. We've deployed the most capital to date here in the state. We are the largest venture firm by, assets under management standpoint here. And we are continuing to, quote unquote, double down here in Iowa with the launch of our third venture fund dedicated to investing in Iowa companies as other firms are pulling back or pivoting to different endeavors. So I think that we are absolutely, the most active, but we are definitely the most leading as well.
So the big question is, are you doubling down on a sinking ship, or are you doubling down on a ship that has potential to sail into the future and grow the state? That's the challenge, right?
Yes, that is the challenge. And you've highlighted that well in your opener. And from our purview, we are bullish on the opportunities that Iowa presents. And I don't think that I would qualify this as a sinking ship. I would just qualify this as there are opportunities being left on the table, and we're not seeing the level of participation that we need to capture those opportunities.
And that's go ahead. And that's what I want to talk. That's a good framing, because we do hear sometimes, Business Record just ran an article. There used to be Silicon Prairie News. I don't know if that exists anymore or it got bought out. It doesn't really matter. But we used to hear people in Des Moines specifically, but Iowa in general, saying things like, we want to be a startup hub of the Midwest. That's what we want to be. And this actually started with a LinkedIn discussion you and I had, which I think we're in agreement on this. But basically, Iowa, put up or shut up. Stop talking about it. You're not a startup hub. It's not true. So if you want to be there, you're going to have to sink your money in the state. Otherwise, take a seat is essentially what this was. So
absolutely.
So this is what we're going to discuss is, can we possibly be a startup hub? Are we arguably one right now? My data says no. But let's start with, who the heck actually cares? Why should we care? You mentioned ahead of time, look, some of the biggest GDP producers are venture-backed. Mm-hmm. So let's set the stage here so people listening are like, why do I care if Iowa is a tech center and if venture companies are investing here? Why do I care?
Yeah, that is perfectly said. So let me kind of back up and start with the bigger frame. So venture capital investment represents only 0.2% of the U.S. GDP, yet VC-backed companies generate 21% of the nation's GDP.
Goodness.
Venture capital generates more economic and employment growth in the U.S. than any other investment sector. So that right there shows the importance of venture capital. Now, when we look at the Midwest lags in terms of venture capital availability, yet the Midwest is home to a third of our Fortune 500 companies and 20 of the world's top research universities. We also have top talent here. We're leading in terms of research and development, new patents, but we're not seeing that level of deals getting funded. Now, when you take that a level further and you look at Iowa, We're number one in insurance. We are number one for vaccine and immunotherapy, biological manufacturing. We are number one in renewable energy. We're the number one producer for pork and eggs and the second largest exporter of ag in the United States. We're number 4 for manufacturing GDP, and we are outpacing the nation for job growth in the bioscience sector. That screams opportunity to me, and that is where venture capital is hugely critical to support those endeavors. Now, is Iowa a startup hub? Absolutely not. In 2022, which is the most recent ranking of Iowa in terms of risk capital, we rank 35th. And the reason we jumped up from 45th in 2020 was the creation of, Innoventure Iowa, the state-run venture fund.
Yes.
But now that a lot of that capital has been deployed and Next Level's capital has been deployed and ISA Ventures capital has been deployed, we've seen at least a 50% decrease in the availability of venture capital since 2022.
Because were you primarily hoping, like ISA, definitely not as big as you, but notable.
Yeah.
Kaylee, of course, hosts the Iowa Tech Podcast, which you should all subscribe to, please. Great
Absolutely.
show. She is, for those that don't know, behind the Iowa Innoventure Fund. She's the leader of, I don't know the term, but
managing director of that fund, yes.
Yeah, and so were you all kind of hoping that we're going to put this just massive capital and then we're going to see some momentum and other people will come along?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like people are getting that message.
That is really the takeaway here, Justin, is that a lot of effort has been done by, I think the Iowa Economic Development Authority to try to incentivize the creation and growth of risk capital here in the state of Iowa. The Innovation Fund Tax Credit Program, which Next Level Ventures helped create and has been a benefactor of now in our third certified innovation fund, the purpose and intent of that program was to incentivize the placement of capital by Iowa tax-paying institutions to deploy into the innovation ecosystem. And now in our third fund, even though we're still early into the fundraising process, we've really only been able to raise half of what our prior two funds were. And I will say, too, just looking back at the general VC landscape, like liquidity is hard right now. And that's a problem we can't all solve for. And even funds that have had very, very, some of the top tier funds who have had very successful track records nationally even their LPs are just kind of holding back. I think I heard the most recent statistic yesterday was there's $7 billion sitting on the sidelines in terms of what LPs could deploy to fund managers.
And can you, for those that don't know, LP?
Yeah, limited partner. So a limited partner is an investor in a venture fund. And what's happening too is we're seeing more and more concentration of those LP dollars go to coastal funds.
Right.
And our university endowments are guilty of that as well. They typically, this isn't literal, but just for frame of reference, like you think of, a university and at one end of the hall, you have the transfer office, the tech transfer office, where they're helping to license and commercialize the research that's happening at their universities. And at the other end of the hall, you have the university endowment, which is where, all the alumni and others make their donations. And those offices are hiring third-party fund managers from out of the state. They're on the coast. The most common one is in Boston. And they're deploying that endowment fund capital to coastal VCs, and those VCs are investing in competing technologies to our own research institutions. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely one avenue and one thing that I think needs to be closer looked at. But on the institutional side as well, we have a lot of Iowa institutions that have benefited from state programs and state incentives, and they're being seen as the leaders of this innovation ecosystem, and the startups are being left behind in a sense of being part of this innovation ecosystem. And so our institutions just need to do a better job of engaging with the startups as part of this innovation ecosystem, because startups are a huge part of the innovation ecosystem. As I said earlier, they're the number one job creator. They're commercializing new technologies. They can move faster and cheaper than a lot of these institutions can. We're all better for nurturing and incubating and funding these startups and these new technologies, because it only moves us all forward, right?
Do Iowans want this? And I mean that sincerely. Do Iowans want to be a venture-backed startup capital? Do we even care? Because Iowa, and this isn't a bad thing, Iowa historically is more tried and true, risk-averse, one foot in front of the other, don't do crazy stuff, right? That's what Iowa is. And so because 75% of VC-backed startups fail, you have about a 5 to 10% success rate. Are a lot of Iowans just simply saying, you know what? The coasts can have the high-risk chaos.
Yeah.
We're going to do what Iowa does. Like, is this the thing you're running into?
That is a very fair point. So to answer your first part of the question, does Iowa want this? Yes, it's in legislation, right? With the innovation tax credit, the seed investor tax credit. Iowa wants this. They understand the importance of risk capital to the innovation ecosystem and to nurturing startups. But the lack of hand raising, so to speak, to the second part of your question on who's willing to step up and take the risk, yeah, it's not there at the level we need it to be like it is on the coast.
It's kind of like Iowans or just general people want to get in shape, right? I want to be healthier. I want to get in shape, but few people put down the bad food and get into the gym. Is it kind of, it's kind of one of those things?
Yeah, that is a useful metaphor for a way to describe it, right? But yeah, the risk tolerance here in the Midwest is a lot less so, right? Like here in the Midwest, after we graduate college, we're incentivized to go get a full-time job, take on a salary, a steady income, right? Don't take too many risks. Yeah.
Didn't stick.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, if we want to encourage actual economic development, job growth, but we also want to encourage our new grads to stay here in Iowa, we have to work at creating jobs and career paths that are exciting to them. A little anecdote, had a board meeting for one of our portfolio companies, was talking to a fellow board member. His daughter's just took on an internship. She attends one of the Ivy Leagues out on the coast. Her and her classmates all want to go work for a startup. That is their goal after graduating. And we don't have that opportunity here for new grads. We're losing our talent pools to neighboring states. We are exporting talent at an alarming rate. And so we have to adopt a mindset of innovation, and that means taking some risk.
And how much do like VCs, angels in general, how much are they actually investing in Iowa right now? Do we have, I have some rough stuff written down, but like I guess that's the question is I have some rough research, but how much are VCs and angels investing in Iowa right now? So,
you look at InnoVenture Iowa, that's a $40 million fund. Some of that's already been invested. We've invested $65 million to date. We're currently raising our third fund, nearing 20 million. So we've got that much to invest. We're, looking to double that to be able to invest another 20 million here into Iowa companies. And, ISA Ventures at a $22 million fund. They're, still doing some deployment, but nearing the end of that. And so like what we've roughly calculated, and obviously we don't have a firm number unless everyone were to report how much capital was available, but we estimate there's roughly 50 million available in risk capital, angel and funds to invest. And that's not just in 1 year. That's over, an investment period. So that's probably the next 3 to 5 years. To put that into perspective against our counterparts.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
So Iowa, 50 million. Indiana, which I think is our closest competition in terms of demographics, geography, they just, their most recent report, which was last year, they had deployed, make sure I'm not misstating this, they deployed $2.8 billion between 2020 and 2025. So rough math, divide that by 5, that's about $500 million a year that they deployed.
Yeah.
We're at $50 million for the next 3 to 5.
We're losing to Minnesota, Missouri, Illinois, and by the way, we're losing to Nebraska.
Yes.
And as you all know, the N on the Nebraska football team stands for knowledge. So the fact that we're losing to Nebraska is sad, everybody. We got to beat Nebraska.
Especially with the resource, like I mentioned, we have 2 leading research universities here in Iowa. We have some of the best corporate partners here in terms of customer concentration for agriculture and bioscience and healthcare companies. How, right?
And I want to get back to that because we certainly have an environment that has the R&D and the education and the research capability, which startups leverage heavily. But here, to give people more perspective, one of the biggest raises in Iowa, I think, there may be another one, but in full disclosure, they were a client for a 3-month period, is RoboFlow.
Yeah.
And I think their Series A was $20 million.
They just raised $40 million.
They raised again in a Series B, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, here in Iowa was, I think, yes, I believe so.
But I don't think I don't know if any of that money came from Iowa. I know a huge bulk of it came from Craft Ventures, California, and Lockie Groom, who was one of the he was in, I can't remember he was in Stripe or I don't remember what he was in. But so one of the biggest success story startups in the state didn't raise much money from the state. Do you know? And I actually texted Brad and Joseph this morning, busy guys. And I was like, can you disclose how much came from Iowa? I didn't get a response yet.
Yeah. And I don't know either. And in full disclosure, they are a portfolio company of ours, so we were able to get in. We participated in that round. But
in the Series B, you participated at next level.
In the Series A.
In the Series A. So, okay, so there's the answer, right?
Yeah.
Some money did come from Iowa.
Some money, but not a large portion of that.
And
if it
can
was
you disclose how much that was? I mean, it's out there publicly somewhere. But
so, I mean, our investment, I think, only wrote a $25,000 check, which, is strange for a fund.
Wow.
And that's just a
They bought a server with that, something.
Yeah. Well,
but this speaks to the difficulty.
Yes. And I will say, and I don't want to, speak on Next Level's behalf because that was before I was at the fund, but there was a lot of, I think just misunderstanding of what RoboFlow's potential was, if I'm being quite honest. So back to your point on risk, the California VCs saw the potential because they got it. They get it. They see that type of technology every day, and they can understand the use case. They can put their head around it.
True.
I don't think our Iowa investors did, unfortunately. So for our Iowa investors, that's real money and real returns that could potentially come back to our Iowa investors that have been lost now to California VCs. So we talk about this concentration problem. It's not just from the limited partner side of deploying capital into California VCs, but it's the return potential. When those returns hit, that money then flows back to the California VCs and not our Iowa. So we're not creating this flywheel effect because we're missing out on those quote unquote high risk opportunities just because we can't see the applicability, which is unfortunate for, I think, our Iowa ecosystem. I think we have to be able to take bets that we're saying, I don't really understand this, but I think that's okay because these 2 founders are brilliant founders and they get it, they see it, and I believe in their vision. That's what we do as investors is we bet on people.
Right.
And Joseph and Brad, it doesn't get more high tier than that for founders. And we lose a lot of talent like that to coastal VCs because our Iowa investors don't see it.
For those that don't know, RoboFlow is playing, again, client, but they're playing on a global scale at a level most Iowans don't fully understand. And I do have a little access to some of their projects and clients and who they've been working with that I can't disclose. But some of it it would blow your mind. We're like, whoa, we're doing what? Some of it, I'm pretty tech savvy. Most of my clients are in this space. And some of it blew my mind. I was training an AI model myself, and I'm like, this is insane that this is being baked right out of Iowa.
I mean, the simplest way to say it is that it's giving artificial intelligence eyes.
Correct.
Right? Which isn't, it's crazy to think about because you think about the intelligence of humans and vision is a huge input to that. And they're now giving vision to those large language computer models that AI runs on, which it's crazy to think about, but it's hugely impactful. And yeah, absolutely.
Some of the messaging we worked with them on was we give sight to software, and because that's what they're doing. Yeah. Absolutely fascinating company.
Yeah.
But all the reality is here, and Iowa is very behind. I think one of the most written about like capital entities in the state is Plains Angels, but over the course of over a decade, they haven't. I don't know if we have a lot of data. I don't know if they've crossed 25 million or 20 million. That might be generous.
I don't know. I don't have those numbers, so I can't speak to that.
I'm just going off two rough articles from Silicon Prairie News in 2015 and New Camp in 2024. Mm-hmm. Just guessing.
Yeah.
I don't know, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't know either. So I wouldn't be able to speak to those numbers specifically. But in terms of activity, I think it's definitely downsized. But I think the reason for that is you've had a lot of angel investors that have invested in kind of the let's call it the last generation of startups, right? And they're waiting for those startups to exit. And so those angels are facing, the dilemma of, well, in terms of my high risk portion of my portfolio, I'm kind of fully allocated right now until these companies exit. So back to our liquidity issue, right? Which no one can really solve for. And there are obviously the macro environmental aspects to that take place, and we don't have time to talk about those today. But so there's those angels, and so what Plains Angels, to their credit, is trying to do is trying to bring in the next generation of angel investors and get people to think about angel investing and how that plays into your investment portfolio, right? And how you need to have that high risk portion. It doesn't have to be all of it, but it should be some of it. And so there is that education happening, and the group is definitely invigorated, and we're part of that. There's monthly pitches. There's usually 2 to 3 companies presenting. So there's definitely the work being done there to build that momentum.
The goal with Plains Angels and other angel groups like that may not be to generate the $100, $200 million checks. It may be more of an educational thing to get people interested. Mm-hmm. I know that and again, another disclosure, I'm working with these people in Chicago, but like Lofty Ventures over there is doing the same thing. Yep. They're trying to educate people on investing because they're like, if we don't educate people on the basics of this, no one's going to do it. So is this what we're doing then? Do we have to educate people? And is it going to take like a former, I know that like Ben, what's his last name in Pinterest? What's his name? Ben, the founder of the Pinterest. He was a Roosevelt grad.
Yes.
Is it going to take people like him, people who have massive exits, to come back to Iowa and start writing the $100, $200 million checks? Is it going to take that to get the momentum? Is this what we're all waiting for?
That's a great point. So I will say, angels are absolutely a critical component to risk capital, but there are different stages of risk capital, right? And angels are important because they can write those smaller checks that can help at least prove out a concept of a new technology, kind of develop that early traction to decide, won't this work? Is there a hypothesis here that claims that this is a good business opportunity, a viable business opportunity? And then you move on to institutional investors who can really help scale that opportunity once the proof of concept has been proven out, right? And so we need both. And so, yes, it's education, not just from an angel perspective, but also I think maybe it's education and also just some willingness of our institutions, because funds can't deploy capital without institutional partnership. Like Next Level Ventures, I mean, the majority of our capital has come from Iowa credit unions. They don't get any credit as being part of the innovation ecosystem, which is crazy. The majority of capital that has been deployed in Iowa startups today has come from Iowa credit unions.
And that's not gonna cut it.
No. I mean, they should absolutely get credit for leading the charge, but 100%. Absolutely, is that sustainable? No, and they shouldn't have to bear the brunt of that, because you look at Prometheus Awards and all of those institutions sitting around the tables, and they're focused on being innovative internally, but they're not thinking about, well, how can we help develop this ecosystem externally that can also give back to us, right? Yeah.
I just feel like nationally looking in, based on who I speak with and based on the fact that most of my clients are outside of the state. it's almost like it's a patting each other on the back, but everyone else is looking at us saying, it's adorable, Iowa. You let us know when you get serious about this.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where we're at right now.
This is
it
exactly
going
where
to
we're
take then one of those giant players to come into Iowa and be willing to burn hundreds of millions of dollars in order to get this momentum going? Because this is the only way the model works. Whenever you see turnarounds, whether it be communities or businesses or even neighborhoods, it always takes that one person to come in and lead and be willing to sacrifice a ton of money. We do have a model for that here, which is John Papa John.
Yep.
The guy was willing to burn millions, like probably hundreds of millions at this point, into Des Moines to turn around parts of downtown. And with absolutely no expectation of getting anything in return, I think this is the only thing that's going to cut it.
Yeah, that mentality, that you've just hit the nail on the head there. The mentality that John Papa John had is what's missing now from our Iowa ecosystem. John Papa John understood the benefit of growing his company here in Iowa, which led to his success. He gave back that success to Iowa tenfold, right? I can't even quantify what he did for the ecosystem. And, you know, when NLV launched Fund One, a lot of our institutional investors were institutions where their CEO was raised here in Iowa, domiciled here in Iowa. They cared very much about the economic development of their backyard. And that was ultimately why, you know, Fund One and Fund Two were so successful with fundraising. With now what we're seeing, like United Fire Group in Cedar Rapids and others here in the state, here in Des Moines, their CEOs are no longer domiciled here in Iowa. And so that kind of let's give back to the place that built us mentality is lacking. And to your point about those founders like Pinterest, like I don't know an Iowa investor that invested in Pinterest. Like Ben wasn't able to build that company here. He left. And so he doesn't really probably see a reason to have to come back to Iowa. And that's the problem we face with a lot of these successful companies is if our ecosystem is not able to support them in the way that they need to, and they get better support from elsewhere, that's where they're going to give back their time and money. And so I talk about this flywheel effect all the time. And it's like, we aren't going to get that flywheel in motion with where we have founders coming back and writing checks and being the example of leading the way, unless we have an ecosystem that supports them from the very start and through the finish line. So
let me ask you something that is the principle of next level ventures, maybe scares you a little bit, but do we as a state say, you know what? We don't want to be a startup hub. We're fine with being the research and development arm of the startup hubs. Do we focus on that path? Or do we say, we're not a startup hub like broadly? We are an ag tech and bioscience startup hub, period. And Next Level, ISA, Innoventure are absolutely not going to invest in anything outside of that vision because it is our Iowa roots of growing the world's food. World Food Prize, Dr. Norman Borlaug focuses on our technological and scientific contributions to the world. Is that what we're missing? Do we just need to focus on that vision? Do we already do that, maybe?
I think that's part of it. I think, back to the first part of your question.
And that will probably be my last question.
Should we be a startup hub? Absolutely. But yes, we do, I think, need to focus our very few and spread thin resources on the things Iowa does very well: agriculture, bioscience, healthcare, and manufacturing. And, you know, the IEDA programs do center around those already. And so there is already kind of that natural categorization, so to speak, happening of where people are focusing money and time and other resources. But I think that It's an interesting question, and there's probably not enough time to really dig into it. But I guess what I want to say is that the Iowa Economic Development Authority, the state of Iowa, the Technology Association of Iowa, we all present ourselves as an innovation hub. We market ourselves as leading in innovation in the Midwest. And to that point, well, where are we leading in innovation?
That's a good question, because I don't know if that's true.
And right.
Don't reach over here and strangle me just yet.
I know. I that's the thing. If we're going to market ourselves like that, and we are going to promote ourselves nationally and internationally as that, then we have to match our actions to our words.
Well said. Liz Keehner, the principal of Next Level Ventures. If people want to become an LP, they want to learn about investing, or they want to contribute to a fund, or just learn more, what's the website?
Our website is nextlevelvc.com, or you can reach out to me directly, Liz, L-I-Z, at nextlevelvc.com. Even if you just want to learn about what it takes to become an angel investor or investing in a fund, I'm always down to grab coffee. So please don't hesitate to reach out. You can also find me on LinkedIn.
Really appreciate what you're doing. Tough discussion. Some tough truths.
Thank you for having it.
Absolutely. Some tough truths everybody in Iowa needs to kind of come to terms with. I think we're at a crossroads where we need to make some decisions. So I appreciate you working through this with me so our listeners have a better chance understanding it.
Thanks.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.